Hello and welcome. I'm Harrison Tellion,
And I'm Ahmed.
and this is Bottom Line Design, a place where we discuss an intersection of design and business. Joining us today is Andres Gonzalez. Am I saying that correctly?
You got it. You got it. Yep.
Awesome. Known by his followers as Andres the Designer. Andres has accumulated around 50,000 followers. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, and contributed to over 47 design projects and aided to the launch of 4 iOS apps. He began his journey in San Jose University, where he earned a degree in management information systems. He explored various roles, including being a business analyst at Odoo. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Odoo.
Yeah.
Trying to become an iOS developer and trying his hand at starting a marketing agency, which ultimately led him to find his passion in UX design and entrepreneurship. In 2020, he decided to quit his 9-to-5 analyst job and go all in, starting Start Here Studio. When he quit, he only had about 3 months of savings, no clients, and never started any business. It's like quite the time to quit. He helped 4 clients turn their ideas into reality by researching, designing, prototyping, testing, and hiring developers to bring his designs to life. Today, he is the co-founder of ReThink Design, where he helps clients increase their conversion rates through A/B testing. He continues to create engaging YouTube videos where he openly shares his methods and strategies for breaking into the design industry. Andres credits much of his success to his faith, his friendships, and his curiosity, and also a good mindset when it comes to working out, which is riddled all over your stories, and you've been getting nice and beefed up. We're thrilled to have you on the show, man. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Been on the workout game for a bit. Lost 30 pounds. So
Hey, nice.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was
Let's
a
start
chunky boy.
Let's start there. How
Yeah.
how do you blow off steam? How does working out keep your mindset right? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I go through phases where sometimes I gain weight and sometimes I lose weight. But one thing I'm always reminded of when I like get back onto the gym grind is how much of a mental stimulant it is, from a discipline perspective, from a just like mental health perspective. All of a sudden, when you encounter difficult clients or when you encounter, let's say, a bad month in entrepreneurship, all of a sudden those stress levels go a little bit down and you're able to kind of look at things with a calculated, calm attitude, which is like super helpful. And then you just feel confident too. Like even in some of my like sales calls, I'll be like, they don't even see my muscles, but I'm just like, I don't know what it is. It's just, you just kind of walk a little bit different.
Yeah, they feel the flex in your voice.
Something like that, maybe. Yeah.
So, okay, let's hop into the design topic, right? Describe when you first started falling in love with design.
Yeah. I got an interesting story for you guys for this one. So when I was in college, I was really inspired by Steve Jobs, like a lot of people. And I was in Silicon Valley, so San Jose State's a Silicon Valley sort of area. And I was really inspired by like Instagram at the time, Snapchat, and I was really into video. And I was kind of always wondering when I was in college, why isn't there a better video for a social media platform? And and then I kind of thought of like, what if we just transformed an experience that already exists today and double down on video? What would that look like? And so that gave me the idea to create like a video for a social media platform, something like TikTok, something like Snapchat sort of. And so I gathered a group of friends. I put together this presentation. I was like, all right, we're going to learn how to code. We're going to build this thing. I'm really trying to put together a team in college. And when I was doing that, I think Adobe XD might have been like a couple of years old. So I was like, how can I kind of like start putting some of these ideas that I have on paper? And I didn't know what design was. I didn't know what UX design was. I didn't have no idea what that is. All I knew was like, okay, you want to build an app, learn to code was kind of like my 0 to 1 sort of mentality of how to push a product. And so I learned Adobe XD. It's like, oh, you can actually just prototype this thing and kind of like figure out, like get the thoughts out of my head and actually put it on a digital piece of paper, right, your screen. And so I started working on the Adobe XD, and I just remember just being so inspired with process, like the fact that I was able to take something that was in my head and transfer it onto a screen and wire it up in some sort of prototype and then see how the buttons can sort of animate. And I was just so inspired by that. But funny enough, I didn't realize like UX design was an actual profession. I didn't realize what I was doing still was a sort of thing that product designers do. So it wasn't until later in life where I was like, oh wait, I could have been doing that all this time. And
Right.
so yeah, that's how I kind of fell in love with design there.
And so it must have been like, was it when you pressed play within XD that you were like,
Mm,
shit,
bingo.
this is
Bingo.
know the exact moment. So describe those feelings. Describe those feelings that you had when you pressed play on
Yeah.
your part in XD. What happened?
I got goosebumps. I got goosebumps. And then I also remember this. I remember being so excited. I grabbed my phone and I started recording it for a story. And I was like, dude, like this is so crazy. And I was like pressing on it and I was like recording on my phone and posting on Instagram. And I remember there's one song that is tied to that memory of that moment. And it's a Kanye West song. It's I think it's Runaway or Runaway. I forget what the song's called.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and when the beat drops, right after the piano, the beat
Yeah.
drops, and that's when I hit play. That's when it's like, dude, it was like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
wow.
Awesome moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
So I
I feel
became
like
hooked ever since.
a lot of a lot of designers, a lot of entrepreneurs, like their stories kind of like harken back to college, and they start, yeah, like they're just trying to make something happen. Like I mean, I know that was your college experience. That certainly was my college experience. That I was just like, okay, let's see if we can get an idea out the door. Can we get it into people's hands, right?
Mm,
And yeah, like even at that time, it wasn't really until like I think a lot of like the Airbnb doctrine started making it my way that I realized like what this thing is like it's design, right? Because yeah,
mm,
back then it didn't really have a name, like it wasn't really appreciated or perceived as such. Everybody knew like
mm.
Apple was more user friendly or like their stuff was more sleek, right? But
Yeah,
the word design was not like being used in that same like association outside of I think maybe like that small cabal of people who like got it. They understood like this is the thing that Apple's doing that nobody else seems to perceive. And what's funny is
yeah.
like I would love to hear your opinion on this, but I felt like there might have been a shift really within the past like decade, maybe 15 years, maybe. But I really think that like people had not thought about design as a method to solve problems, but
Mm,
just an output on everyday products, or its only attribution was just tied to like color or form, you know?
yeah, absolutely. And the way that I call it that the iceberg effect, where people start connecting a term based on what they can tangibly see. Right. So that's why there's a lot of LinkedIn controversy. I'm like, oh, you're a UI designer, you're a UX designer, whatever it is. People are like fighting online because people don't understand how it's really just it's design, right? And it's an iceberg. And so there's what you see, but there's also the process of how it's done, which is also design. It's just something.
Yeah, yeah, right, right. When you're engaging founders, executive teams, decision makers, product people,
Mhm.
and maybe they're not understanding, maybe one of their teammates brought you in because they understand the value of design, but now as we've all three been in this room understand, it's really important to bring in the other stakeholders onto the design boat, right? How do you go about influencing design as something that's important without
Mm,
maybe having it be a force or shoving it down their throat,
mm. Yeah. It's really interesting. I think I somewhat had that problem in the beginning when I started my design career. And right now, I really don't have that problem at all. Specifically because I got into this new area of design, which is conversion rate optimization. And like business people understand that. You talk about A/B testing and increasing conversion rates are like take all my money. Like, here you go. Help me get more user signups, help me get more purchases, those sort of things. So usually the way that I try to approach, putting design at the forefront is really putting the problem in the forefront, which is, yeah, I noticed a lot of users dropped off at this point. Why do you think that is? Or, hey, I noticed that, there seems to be a lack of a user engagement in this sort of user flow. Like, how can we improve that? Those sort of things. And those questions prompt people. It's like, oh yeah, what do we do? How do we solve this problem? It's like, oh, a redesign. That's what we do. And so design, I think people may start with the solution, but they should start with the problem. Design is a solution, right? Starting with the problem. No one, I think clients don't really care about design. Like, I think some stakeholders may not even care about design, but they care about getting the problem solved, you know? And so you have to come in as the, like, oh, okay, like, let's solve the problem and let's redesign it. Yeah.
Do you find that because we find this all the time, like people they don't understand the value of design, but they're like just there enough after the discovery call. They're like, okay, well, like, we'll pay the Stripe fee, like we'll get like, let's get started. And then after the sprint or like after the project or something, they're like, holy shit, my attitude has completely changed. Tell us about a time where you took a customer from 0 to 1, you know?
So like when they didn't really think about design very much and then they start really loving it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
you design build
Oh,
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I think it's usually so back when I was in Starter Studio days, when I was doing more product design stuff. I literally remember this so very well. As a part of my process, I did things a little bit differently. Instead of like coming up with the low fidelity wireframes and high fidelity and the designs and go through the prototype, I was like, no, F that. Let's start with some concepts in the very beginning and let's start with some prototypes and let's make it come alive. Let's show the splash screen animation. Let's show how the buttons animate. And let's just show like what it could be. Let's just establish the vision of what it is. And I noticed that every single time that I presented to a client with that sort of like 3 or 4 variants of a sort of splash screen and different designs of how it could potentially look with the main screens, home screens, whatever it is, and this, some sort of slight animations and prototypes in the prototype, they were just like 0 to 1 immediately. And ever since then, like their trust, the entire process was just so much easier because they were like, okay, this is great. I love this. Let's build this out specifically. And then they have the illusion of choice as well, where I'm presenting like 3 or 4 options, right? But it's really like I'm giving them some sort of like illusion of designing that they're choosing.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. So it's really about showing them, like we always describe. It sounds a lot like the way that we describe it, where it's like design, like it's always that first pass on like maybe that law office's website, or maybe like
Yeah.
that biopharma website or something, where they're like, it's pretty like dry and dour, right? Like it's pretty like sad. And then like you come in with this first wave of like a UI overhaul, and you like sprinkle in a bit of animation, like sprinkle in a little bit of like information architecture. Then suddenly, boom, design has paved the way for the executive team or the decision makers to now think more clearly about their product. Do you find that there was a time where that was not the case, where you did present it and you had to kind of like backtrack and like re-strategize?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's only happened to me once in my entire career.
Okay.
Once. And I think the reason it's only happened to me once is because like I've done like I think energy is somewhat contagious. And so when you're really excited about something, like clients get really excited too and stakeholders get really excited as well. But there was one client that was a difficult oddball. And what I realized in working with him was I was too attached to my own design style and my own sort of like, let's say taste, because there is some level of taste in design as well.
Oh, for
And
sure.
his taste was very different. And so that kind of threw me off for a muck. And I think over time, it's still like my willingness to completely scrap things and try again and try again. And my just willingness to like completely destroy everything that I built and be non-emotional about it as well. Like just, oh, you don't like my designs? My designs are shit. Cool. Like let's throw it away. Like but also understanding like where it is that they're coming from and understanding like what exactly they mean, asking those good questions, peeling the onion a little bit. So really is a combination of just like asking really good questions and willing to just scrap everything and start over.
Well, I'm curious then to hear like when do you feel it's like a difference of taste versus the person may just not understand the principles of design.
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. Um, I guess I think it comes down to knowing the principles has to be like before you set, before you consider taste, I think knowing the principles helps you separate things. So for example, choice in color can be taste, but contrast is not taste, it's
Yeah.
science, right? What's another good example? Like choosing a font might be taste, but typography and visual hierarchy is a science, it's design, right? So it's those sort of things that like those little nuances between the two that kind of matter. Um, so yeah, I hope that kind of
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's a great. That'll probably be the title of the video. Uh, taste first principles.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Exactly. Wow. Yeah. That's like super interesting because it's also some of the stuff that you're talking about, like in the science layer of it, it like sort of also feeds back into the analytical side of like conversion rate optimization, right?
Mm,
Like, do you ever find that you're leaning on prior data that you gathered, that you gathered based off of data from previous CRO experiences that you've had, talking with a client that's like, no, no, it really should be this way, and you're like, okay, you just haven't done like a few dozen of these experiments the way I have. Like, let's save a couple weeks of that, like just doing it what I know is going to work.
yeah, absolutely. So at this point in Rethink Design, it's almost like I like have top five ideas that like always tend to get wins. And so it's become less and less of an experimentation and more of like, okay, let me confirm my hypothesis that's already been confirmed like 5, 10 times. A great example of this is let's say we're talking on like a Shopify store, um, and we're talking about the checkout experience specifically, and we're specifically looking at the product page. And so sometimes what people do is that they on their product page they don't have a fixed add to cart button that stays at the bottom of the screen on mobile specifically, and most traffic comes from mobile anyway. So it's just by making the add to cart uh, button and maybe like a quantity as well, just by making it fix at the bottom, you're increasing conversions by like a pretty crazy amount. And also by removing any sort of chat widget or any sort of other fixed item and just making that add to cart button really easy and really accessible. It's just like super easy win. Um, and so those are certain things like I kind of do where it's like, you know, let's just kind of get it done.
Okay, ecom founders.
Yeah,
Okay, you heard it.
yeah,
Okay,
I'm giving away all my secrets.
sticky add to cart. Sticky add to cart.
drop that chat bug this instant.
You it's you almost gave up multiple times in your not gave up, but you had like these pivotal moments throughout your career. Um, what describe the mindset that prevented you from doing that? What were some moments that like influenced you to keep on going?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the element of entrepreneurship has made it really difficult, if I'm being really honest. I sense that if I, had a little bit more of a stability when it comes to finances, I wouldn't have this sort of dramatic give up moments. And I'll give you a recent example, actually. It's April tax season. You got to pay, I had to pay for the first time in a long time, a really big tax bill. And I knew it was coming. And it's not like I didn't have the money saved, but it just seeing those numbers go down and seeing the cash flow go down in combination. I had another client, like literally that same month, I had a client that was on retainer for almost like a year. And he said, yeah, we're going to cut the retainer by 50%. But really, I haven't gotten any work. So really right now it's like 90% that he cut. So the tax bill on top of the client, telling me that the retainer that what I kind of depend on sometimes, like every single month for guaranteed work, really made me question whether I should continue in the entrepreneurship side specifically. And sometimes, and to be 100% honest, sometimes I'm like, maybe I should just let this entrepreneurship thing go. Because I honestly think all the time, I'm like, maybe I should just, work at it. Maybe I take a contract role like a larger company, a much larger budget. I'm working less hours and I'm getting paid more. Like, so what am
When's
I
all
doing right
uh,
now?
time up? Like,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so
Yeah.
okay, this is like I just want to chime in here because like we've been having this conversation, Harrison and I, for like half a decade now. Um, as a non-hypothetical. Before that, it was like another like 2 or 3 years prior, and like I gotta say, like the thing that has helped me understand getting through the hard times, and I mean, dude, yeah, seeing a cash flow statement that goes down and then seeing kind of like recurring revenue churn at the same time that like a one-time expense hits and you're like, okay, let's amortize this. Oh, that doesn't make it any better.
cash flow down, cortisol
Yeah,
up.
yeah, exactly, right. And like the philosophy that has been really helpful for us, for me personally, like, and me trying to explain what I'm doing to the people around me because they're just like, it's Saturday. What do you mean you can't hang out? And I'm like, don't you get it? Like I don't have like work life
Yeah.
are not like they're not separated for
Mm.
entrepreneurs, right? It's like all fused together, and like I think about it like it's almost like homeownership versus renting,
Mm.
right? That like when you're an entrepreneur, like what you're doing is like you're building equity in this like thing that you're creating, right? And so like when you take the uncertainty the same way like if we were homeowners and our roof caved in, there'd be no landlord to call to go like fix it, and that's their problem. Like it's
Mm.
our problem, right? Now it's nice being a tenant because it's someone else's problem when like the foundations get rocky like that, but it's also kind of nice to be the homeowner or the landlord because like if the value gets built up, right, like in that home, that's like,
Absolutely.
It's yours for the taking.
that's yours. Yeah, exactly. And so I mean,
Absolutely.
it's like when you're building out your like your following on socials, right? Like you're figuring out, I mean, literally this is both the basis of your business, but also something you do for your business, figuring out how to like alchemize like internet attention into money,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
Like it's
absolutely.
hard.
It's
It for
hard.
sure. But yeah, like
Yeah. And you're 100% right. That's exactly what keeps me going. Like, that's exactly what it is. It's really, well, I have an idea that if I just work just a little bit more, just another month, I'll have my breakthrough because, working as a contractor or getting like a 9 to 5, you're kind of capped somewhat,
yeah.
to a certain degree. And that kind of, not that that's not, like I'd still consider it, but there's less excitement there with that cap. There's something exciting about it's all up to you. You the sky's the limit. Like you can take this as far as you can, sort of thing. So that's kind of what drives me as well.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say also like there's certainly it's like a not to, whew, man, not to like completely shuffle the metaphor here, but it's like a type of vehicle, like right, yeah, right.
Yeah, this is I know you guys are from Y Combinator. If you guys, this is exactly the Y Combinator talk.
I basically have like this running theme of like I call them just like agreeisms, and it's a combination of just like witty quips and like analogies or metaphors.
but,
Yeah.
but like this is like what you're describing also, right? Is like if you are feeling like your work is a vehicle for your ambition, you're gonna
Mm.
get at in some capacity burnt out in like a 9 to 5 job or doing some sort of stable contracting or freelancing. The same way, like if you're looking to work to be like simply like a bedrock that can kind of run on autopilot so that you can cultivate like other corners of your life or whatever, you're probably going to find a lot of burnout dealing with like the highs and the lows, right? And the way your stomach feels going up and down that roller coaster, building a business.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so there is what question? What question? So I think like one thing that we are discussing that we want to know a little bit more about is like how do you get? And I think you alluded to this in terms of like almost like giving them choice, but choice that you've curated. How do you get clients to be involved in the design process without overwhelming yourself, without overwhelming them, and letting them
Mm,
kind of like steer the ship?
yeah. When in doubt, um, I think what I typically try to do is I don't try to do design work in a vacuum necessarily, but I don't show designs that that I'm not happy with. So I act as my own sort of filter. So I don't run with a design and kind of don't show it to the client. And that's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is I try to show designs where I'm like, okay, this is like a really good, let's say like a dribble shot or like a really good presentation of what this could be. And then I'll continue doing that across the line. And so what that does is that gives the client a the vision of where I'm trying to take this without the need to understand all the little grains of sand and all the little details. Right? Like maybe they don't need to see maybe they just need to see one input form, right? They don't need to see all the other inputs in all the other forms and all these other different places, right? Maybe that's not where their strengths are. They're hiring me as a designer to kind of figure that stuff out. So also kind of figuring out where does a client need to be involved and where does a client not need to be involved. Um, some good examples of this is like the client needs to be involved in the overall like vision and direction of what problem we're trying to solve, right? But the execution of it from a, let's say, design perspective of how a user may get to step 1 to step 7, right? Maybe that's where my expertise is. And maybe that's where I take the wheel, right? So I think usually in the beginning I did a little bit uh, more of me driving and then just like here's what it is, here's where we're going. And usually the clients are like, oh cool, keep going. So I would never really get much pushback, but I actually tend to see now that I involve clients a little bit more, um, that sometimes it actually it slows down the entire process and it's sometimes even because they're not designers, they're hiring you to be a designer. So
Yeah.
it's like you have to know the difference. Yeah.
And what do you say to the founder or the stakeholder that's kind of like the stick in the mud, that's like, oh well, we can't do any of this because like our stacks in React, and diffuse shadows are hard to React, or like we're on WordPress and we can't do dick on WordPress, or like basically this idea of like what you can't, even though 42% of the internet is on WordPress, you just can't. Okay, you can't. But like, what do you say to those clients that are kind of like just a stick in the mud, but
Mm,
you know you, it's the right answer, some other team members are on the right answer, but you need their buy-in?
yeah. I go back to like the conversion rate optimization conversation.
Mm.
That's kind of nice. No, but like the whole like start with a problem. Hey, I noticed that you're seeing a drop in conversions, and then when there's ever a pushback, I got pushback on one of the pages for an agency on the contact page. It was like, this is too simple. It's like, why is this so simple? And I was like, if there's a place where conversions matter, it's the contact page. So let's keep things simple, right? Like if there's a knob to turn, right? Like maybe in the about page where it's people are maybe going there for more exploratory purposes, you
Mm.
can make it a little bit more fancy. But on the contact page, you don't F with the contact page. You make it super simple. You minimize the fields. You almost like copy what Google and all these like larger players are doing. You don't overcomplicate it. So that was a conversation that I had with the client. And then ultimately I was like, okay, I gave them the option, the illusion of the choice, but I made their choice so nasty and illogical that they were like, okay, let's do it your way. So like I basically said, okay, we can go with a little bit more of a, intricate design, something a little bit fancier for the contact page, but would you be okay with seeing less conversions than that? Would you be okay with leaving money on the
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
table?
It's not even really like
Yes, we
making
would.
it
It's like,
right.
really?
Yeah, it's not even really at that point like making it nasty or illogical as much as it is just showing them that they're getting in the way of their own objectives,
Mm.
right? Like you want X to happen, but you also have this like unrelated desire for the contact page to look like this. that will get in the way of X, your conversion rate, or yeah, revenue.
Absolutely.
And it also sounds like
Absolutely.
you're leading with you're helping them. You're pointing. You're reflecting back to them what intention they came to you with, which is it's not just about conversion. It's about, hey, I mean, I always bring it back to like the squint test. If you were to go into like any one of these, any one of the fan companies, right, and just squint your eye naturally leads to the next place they want you to go to, be it a CTA, a piece of content. So that's pretty interesting. So for you, it's about steering them back to their original intent.
Absolutely. And questioning their objections as well.
Yeah. So what is it like? Is there anyone or anyone in particular or any experience that was kind of like unexpected that may have just shaped your career? Like what
Mm.
happened? I almost feel like it was a moment after the Kanye West play button in XP and where you are today, somewhere in between there.
Yeah. So your question is, has there ever been anything unexpected in between that time?
Yeah.
I think the biggest unexpected outcome is that I've survived this long. I think that's probably the biggest unexpected outcome. Because to be honest, like I don't think I'm a great entrepreneur, to be honest. And I think designers have a tough time with entrepreneurship because they want to do everything themselves. They're not great delegators. Um, and so the unexpected thing is, despite my shortcomings, I've been able to make it work and keep the lights on. I've been able to consistently generate revenue throughout this entire time, which is, I think, pretty cool. I'm like, whoa! And I never started a business before, so it's not like I had any prior experience. I had only 3 months of savings when I started, and so there's just a lot of things that I like. Either I got really lucky, I probably got really lucky. Uh, I mean, this far, so that's unexpected. I survived.
I want to go a little bit deeper into that because it almost is like it's almost like a little bit of a cliche or like a trope, right? Like, why is it that designers we feel that we want to do everything ourselves? We feel
Mm,
like maybe we're not the best at delegating, or we don't have like that entrepreneurial spirit. I mean, like, a handful of us do, but for the most part, I think you're right. Like, there are some characteristics that you might find in like your traditional entrepreneur or founder that kind of become like abstracted away,
mm,
when it comes to like the design discipline. Is it I have theories around like why that is. I think like a lot of designers are fairly
yeah.
altruistic, like pretty selfless, and like that's just not in their nature to command a room, command a vision. But there's
Mm,
certain like, the executioners of it. Like what I can
yeah.
rant about that for a while, but I want to hear like what you have to say on that.
Yeah. I think what it really comes down to is ego. I think designers understand that the thing that they're designing in some way reflects their own identity, whether they like to accept it or not. And it's kind of true. Like even things where it's not really 100% design, let's say just choice of what you buy. When you make a purchase to buy an Android versus an iPhone, like there's a reason for that reflects something of your character. And it even goes further when you're designing or creating something. Like the business that you create is really a reflection of you, whether you like to accept it or, admit it or not. And so as a designer, you're kind of having this, you have to have this sort of ego death to be a really good entrepreneur and say, you know what, like, I may, this, I need to let go of the need to reflect my own identity into this and allow for others to be a part of the mix and guide them and empower them to do a better job. Where I need to kind of think more about the vision and learn how to lead people and kind of take myself away from the executionary design perspective. So I think it's ego, and I think it's that sort of reflection of you create who you are, or that sort of connection between what you're creating and who you are. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, by the way, is one of the reasons why, for all the pain, the way that I've been able to find pain in entrepreneurship or find value in that, like suffering and frustration, is that like every single time you encounter it, all that's really getting encountered is basically your ego and your failure to confront reality, right?
Yeah.
And like to that. And I think it's a lot easier to like not have to confront your own failure to confront reality in an environment where things are more insulated, right?
Mm.
But like go out in the real world and like you miss the mark, or yeah, you got this big tax bill coming up and it comes at the same time as like a retainer churn. I mean, like we've certainly been there. We've had our own flavors of that.
Oh,
But
sure.
yeah, like it just you're like, whoa, okay, I haven't like processed this is happening, this is real. But on the flip side, I think like once you get really good at being in touch with that, like
Mm.
the business almost turns into like a crystal that's just like the shape of you, and it like echoes
Mm.
outward and gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time.
Absolutely. I love the analogies. The analogies are top fucking tier.
And it's so good, and it makes like starting up a company with this guy that much more enjoyable. It
You
kind
know
of
what you
just
kind of
like
remind me of? Just like really
you.
quickly, you remind me of Michael. Like Michael uses a lot of analogies as well.
Oh,
CEO of, yeah, Michael, I forget his last name. Uh, partner at Y Combinator.
yeah, wow, that's I
Yeah,
mean that's I hope one day that I could be as helpful as
he uses
yeah.
a lot of analogies for sure.
So one thing that I was curious about going a little bit deeper into is how it, in your opinion, like how is it that a founding team or like an executive team or a design manager
Mhm.
pulls out the entrepreneur within their design team or pulls out the
Yeah.
designer? Because we all can agree that when you have an entrepreneurial uh, designer, better work gets made. But how do you get there? How do you is it through inspiration? What are those mechanisms? Is it through what is it?
Yeah, I mean that's tough because I've honestly haven't met too many designers who are entrepreneurs. Um, and the designers who sometimes try to be entrepreneurs are really entrepreneurs. So like there's even a greater filter there. But the ones that I have met that are really great, usually there's something about what's already within them. So it's somewhat tough to teach because it speaks to internal motivations, right? It speaks to your ability to let go of your ego. It speaks to some of like the softer skills, which are it's a little bit tough to teach, to be honest. But it's easier to observe. It's easier to identify in someone's history or their track record. So I would say really it's really like a hiring question. It's like what sort of stories or what sort of stories in history can you uncover in someone's experience that may highlight whether they have that sort of entrepreneurial spirit. And I think I've established that very early on, for me, out of necessity. Immediately, it's like you're either gonna go broke and go into debt, or you're gonna make some money, dude. You got to get real fucking get your priorities straight. Uh, so that's kind of been my history, but I don't know. I don't know what that may look like for others, to be honest. Yeah, I guess it just really depends.
Yeah. Okay. And
Yeah.
so for you, talk a little bit more about that though. Like, what are some of those characteristics that you find in a designer that is entrepreneurial? Like, what would a design manager or like a stakeholder be looking for to filter for that during like the hiring
Yeah.
process? Let's say.
That's a great question. Okay. I guess one can start with a business first mentality. So a designer who has a business first mentality can be like a good quality. And what I mean by that is like, how did your designs impact the business? Like, was it just taste,
Oh
or
yeah.
was there something tangible behind it? Like, what drove you to do this? So those sort of things. Like for me, the second business I started, ReThink Design. That's all just conversion rate optimization on e-commerce companies, and even some a SaaS company as well. It's like everything is like sort of business, driven. And so I'm really not on the like super duper creative side right now. which has its own pros and cons, but that skill is insane. Uh, and so kind of, getting familiar with why they make certain design decisions is maybe a great test. And also even separated from design, like you can even like open it up to be like, okay, why did you just make this decision in general? What were you trying to explore? And so this can even be like a college story in a project. It can go beyond that. Like how well do they think about like a business specifically? What drives revenue? Those sort of things. How do they make money? Those sort of things.
It's pretty crazy, like how quickly when you move beyond thinking about individual pixels and where they're going to be located, you quickly like run into, oh, the discipline of design is more or less like applied thoughtfulness,
Mm.
right? Which is why I think, yeah, it makes sense that you're finding like asking them about their understanding of the business and like tying the design's role to like business impact, right? Is where you would find that like mindset connect, right, between like
For sure.
kind of what this podcast is about, right? Like design. Um,
I
yeah,
will say
yeah.
this.
Please.
I will say this to kind of like on the other side of the coin, because often like all this, there's a lot of controversy sometimes in LinkedIn versus like, like, oh, user research and like visual design. And they try to juxtapose these two things like they're two very different things when they're really not. It's like the iceberg. They're all kind of connected in a way. And what I think is undervalued, like if I was hiring designers, what I would really look for was designer intuition as well, because the skill of like, researching and kind of thinking about the business, even those things can somewhat be taught. Okay, let's focus on what drives revenue, and here are some of the elements that we can look out for. The designer intuition is really great for startups, especially Y Combinator startups, because they often don't have users. They don't have large budgets for user testing, and so you really got to focus on designer intuition. So principles, what are principles of design that tend to increase conversion rates? What are principles of design that tend to keep users engaged with their principles that make for a really usable product? So that's like kind of the other side of it.
What are some of those principles in those three
Yeah.
categories?
Yeah. So the biggest ones for me that I try to pay attention to a lot is like visual hierarchy. So like what people will see first. So having really good visual hierarchy. If there's too many things on the screen that all have high contrast and like are colorful, then nothing is being emphasized, and you can't even process what you're looking at, right? That's like one element, one principle. What other principles that I think are really important? Um, there's the one that I really like saying, like the aesthetic usability effect, where things that look good, like look good visually, like have a premium sort of visual look, users tend to rate in the survey that they actually are more usable, right? Usable meaning like, oh, they had an easier time using it because of well, it really just looked better. It had like sort of just a aesthetic to it that looked really nice. And I think maybe Apple has something to do with that. I don't know.
Yeah. Sign MSG.
The panache.
Whoa, too much panache.
Whoa, please.
Please.
Put it in the hand first, then we're gonna.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
There's another good principle of having text always be left aligned for the most part. That's kind of there's obviously exceptions, but you want it to be left aligned to increase readability. Right? When there's a straight line at the left, it's easier to scan, easier to read. Also width. So if you're like on a desktop, you don't want it to be too wide. It makes it again more difficult to read, difficult to scan. What are some good other ones? Yeah, those are some.
So a lot of what you're saying, it sounds like it really comes down to first impressions, composition, hierarchy, weight, ratios, things of that nature. That's pretty interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but like that's true. I guess like when, in the context of, you know, uh, specifically what you're working on with your clients, it's really all about first impressions in and capturing in the TikTok era that first 3 to 7 seconds of someone's attention. What are they
Yeah,
feeling? You want them to feel in those first few moments of landing on your page.
absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah. And I would say it even has, I mean, I think the TikTok sort of attention span thing has to do with like a really good job. But like, if you think about the principle of cognitive load, like if something takes a while for me to understand, it's usually a bad design. But if
Yeah,
something takes me a short period to understand, it's usually a good design. So
yeah.
the first impression, I think, does somewhat connect to that. But I think really the principle, right? We're talking about principles, is the cognitive load. How long does it take for me to understand what's going on?
And you know what's crazy is in the opposite direction, that can actually, it can also be just as successful. I think about Snap or Twitter.
Mm,
Inherently is a barrier to entry, but the engagement loop, the retention actually comes in the form of a user. In Snap's case, it was tweens. In Twitter's, it was just managers and directors in Silicon Valley. Like they understood how to actually use the platforms habitually because the design was not obvious. Twitter's is still
mm,
not obvious and it's not getting it. Snaps is now obvious, but they created this like almost exclusive environment for teenagers to share whatever, do whatever they want, but it was learned. They had to go on it every single day. It was if I was to have Snap be presented to like, my mother, she doesn't know what the fuck is going on, you know? I'd be like, well, how do I share a photo? Where's the camera icon?
Do you guys remember when the Snap stories would be, it was like a stopwatch circle that would like clear away
Yeah.
as you got closer and closer to the 24-hour mark, and they would superimpose all your circles, like thumbnails of your stories on top of each other. So if you had like 24 stories that you had done, yeah, over
yeah,
24 hours, it was just like a completely illegible like little like lemon wedge
right.
of like unrelated
But those 12 and
places.
13-year-olds, they got it.
They totally understood
They
it.
understood
Yeah.
it, but their parents didn't. And
Yeah.
and that's why
Mm.
Snap is still going, I guess.
Yeah.
And Facebook isn't.
Yeah. That's the timeline we live in, right?
Yes, it's interesting. That's very interesting. But I will say this: don't you remember a time where there's a luggage without rotating wheels? Do you remember that time?
The luggage with the lemon wedge wheel
Yeah, or just like a regular wheel that wasn't rotating. Do you remember that?
that it wasn't
Yes.
rotating.
Yeah, I do.
Like it
Yeah,
was
Yeah.
like
so you had to
Yeah.
drag your luggage. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
oh yeah
Yeah.
yeah yeah
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah
And it was almost
and
like
like
rims.
and sometimes it would do this, like you would try to turn, and sometimes it'd be like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Okay, so that's also design. Now all luggages, or nearly all luggages, have rotating wheels. So what that says as well, to a certain degree, is that sometimes design is a science, and it's not about what's learned behavior. Sometimes there's just a better way to design something. And I think about that sometimes. I'm like, what is, like, sometimes we see these design trends, but sometimes these trends are not trends that just go away. Sometimes they're just better. Like the rotating wheel is just a better design. You can stand it,
yeah
you can rotate it. It's just better, right? So that's what I think about sometimes when I'm designing. I'm like, what would be like the ultimate version of this? It's tough, but yeah,
yeah.
it's a question.
Yeah, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that kind of thing for like the new frontier that's cracking open with compute and AI? Because I feel like mobile introduced all these interactions that needed to get figured out that like we got from it, like the pull to refresh, we got the swiping
Thank
interactions.
you,
Yes,
Twitter.
Yeah, right.
yeah,
We love talking
dude.
about that. Yeah.
Whoever masters that aspect, whoever masters or figures out what's the best way to design when it comes to augmented reality, when it comes to introducing AI into a digital space, whoever really masters that is going to be the next billionaire, or is going to help the person who's going to become the next billionaire.
Oh,
It's it's everything.
Are there any examples, people or products or services that come to mind that are kind of like leading the charge on that? No obvious ones like Apple.
I know. I was going to say I'm waiting for Apple to see because I really want to analyze what they do because they usually like think about it very, very like strategically. Um, I have to give credit. As much as Meta is, is filled with their controversy. I think what they built um, is is more intuitive than I've seen any other, like from a VR perspective,
Yeah.
than any other platform. They're probably leading the charge right now. When it comes to
A UI or
Talk about Oculus.
I'm talking about the Quest. I know it's called Oculus before, but yeah,
Oh,
the
right.
Quest
Yeah,
2.
yeah. RIP the Quest.
So when it comes to like the VR stuff, I can see that, 'cause it has a light up, so it has certain elements. It needs a lot of improvement to just to be real, but of the players, right, who I think has like the best sort of design ish that I've tried at least, it has to be the Quest 2. In terms of AI, AI is difficult because there's so many applications. So you got to get somewhat contextual on like what sort of application are we talking about? Like,
Yeah.
are we talking about like ChatGPT 4 is a, you know, almost like a Google sort of question
Right.
and answer response interaction. So, but there's also really interesting ones where it's like I'm doing a video editing. I'm editing this podcast, and there's an AI that cuts every single time someone speaks. Right?
Right.
There's that application. So I think AI is more contextual. So it's difficult to say, one AI company that's leading the charge. Say, pay attention to like really interesting AI applications, which is like the editing one. I think video editing is so antiquated. Right now, video editing, I do my own edits for my own YouTube videos. Right now, the whole video editing space is like living in the 2010s, dude. It's crazy how like antiquated the software is and how difficult it is for, the ordinary person. Um, so I think
Yeah.
maybe AI can help in that area. Who knows?
I know what company you're talking about because we just signed into our video
Oh,
editor this
yeah. Yeah.
morning.
We totally did. We totally did. Carlos took it over,
Yeah,
right?
and it has like a blue logo. There's only one video on their Insta and like just a couple thousand followers. I'm like, how the fuck is this not like making it in Hollywood right now or like the podcast scene? But yeah, it's like what 24 bucks a month or something.
Yeah,
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 totally underpriced. But I mean, it's crazy with the AI stuff too. Like, you didn't get a sense the magnitude of like the tide shift that's about to come. Which, by the way, everybody on this podcast, breathe a sigh of relief. It's not coming for our jobs, but like Upwork and Fiverr, their stocks are down. I think like over 50%.
good time. I'm not gonna say that. It may be a good time to buy it.
Maybe, yeah, not
Yeah, not in financial.
absolutely
yeah,
not.
confidential.
uh, could be something interesting to check out. Like, yeah, like I think that their stocks have been down like serious numbers since OpenAI came out because I think that like the rote end of the pyramid, right, where it's like there's no context, it's like you know very hard to sort of like you have to micromanage it almost like that's going to get gobbled up by AI. So then it's like, yeah, how do you
Yeah,
orchestrate and compose that stuff? I think you're totally right that like the patterns that emerge because it's like such a big change are going to be contextual.
for sure. And even further than that, if there's any designers or entrepreneurs watching this, like if I feel like your audience is probably not going to be scared of AI, but the very few people that are afraid it's going to take their jobs. And this is the clip, right? Clip
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
There's going to be a golden era of design and of AI specifically, where you can basically like take advantage of these tools and become like a 5x 10x designer and
Yeah.
make more money doing so, because the fact of the matter is most stakeholders, most clients are not going to know how to use some of these tools, and they might be a little bit too complex for them to use on their own. So when you think about these tools, like they're still a driver at the end of the day with all of these AI tools. They're not fully crazy automated. So the people who learn how to use them, it's like you're gonna be like 5 or 10x, like the business opportunities, the entrepreneurship opportunities that are gonna come. Like maybe I can do personally, maybe I can train somebody to do like 10 design projects instead of two, and all of a sudden, I've quadrupled X or whatever because now they can do so much more work. And so there's going to be a time period where basically clients and the AI space is also new, that, it's not meant for non-technical users, like even prompt engineers or that sort of thing. People are all of a sudden paying for others to create these intricate prompts to get them, desired result. So like there's going to be a really interesting golden age where there's going to be more jobs and more money. So don't be worried, like take
Yeah.
advantage.
And it's like pretty easy. It's pretty easy if you're in a field that like is susceptible to commodification.
Mm,
Like I think it's pretty easy to fall to find yourself falling into a trap of like AI's coming. Like, what's the point? But
mm,
we were talking to our buddy, like he's a shoe designer, Jake at Nike, and he was telling me like, you know, now he's using Midjourney and Dolly to like inspire him. He's almost becoming somewhat of like a prompt design expert, and he's coming up with these new crazy shoe designs that like there's just no way. There's no way that some muggle is thinking about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like with like all the information that some of these AIs have access to. It's just like it's impossible. So he's basically now like on steroids.
Hmm.
Designing kind of doing this stuff, and it's not playing victim. It's actually like AI is like armor and a sharper edge on my
Totally.
soul.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very.
I mean, and that's been our history, by the way. Like every single time, like this conversation is not new.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's like that's literally been the history of whatever. Apply a different revolutionary technology. We're having
yeah.
this exact conversation. Oh, it's going to take our jobs, whatever it is. And it's like, well, yes and no. Like your job will change, but it doesn't mean your job will like fully get automated away. For the most part, you're just going to become a way better, more efficient person. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think going back to it, like that's like the entrepreneur can't escape that reality. And I think that's why like every founder I talk to is like crazy excited. No one's nervous in like in the founder
Yeah.
scene about AI. They're all crazy excited about it because it it's very much a driver position, right? Like it's like when you're the founder, you're in the driver's seat
The
and
hard part is I feel like
yeah.
is trying to figure out like all the founders I've talked to is like they're now trying to figure out like okay like how do I actually like harness it.
Yeah.
Mm,
Like they're not really spending too much time thinking about like how they're worried about it. It's like okay, how do I leverage it?
Right.
mm,
That's that
yeah.
contextualization you were talking about, right? And I think that's like it may be another decade of like that's like the next 10 years are just going to be spent everybody trying to figure out how to commercialize and apply this. Like I mean,
Mm-hmm.
this is also I don't know about YouTube, but like I know this for sure in like so many of the mobile apps that I designed like back in the day, some of my first like sort of swings at bat. One of the first things that I would build was a map. It was always like I love shipping this.
They're so fucking hot.
Yeah,
Maps are
like,
so hot.
yeah, and it's just like it makes it real. It's like whoa, like yo, you can
Yeah,
see our like
yeah.
location right
Fair
now.
compare.
Fair compare. Yeah, one of our first collabs
Yeah.
was an app that would compare the cost of an Uber versus a Lyft to get between two places.
We got delisted so quick.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Did we not?
No, we voluntarily delisted. Yeah, I think we like the
Oh, okay.
API teams never really because they're like you really can't use the API for like putting us in price competition with each other.
But
And
we
it's
did.
like
We did like a couple thousand people.
there were there were a few thousand downloads on it, but yeah, just I think
Easily.
yeah, like
You want to take us out?
all right, yeah. So guys, that's today's episode. Andres, thank you so much for coming on. Truly a blast talking with another design artist.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
And thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys being here. For whoever's watching this, you can follow me on Instagram at Andres the Designer. I also have a YouTube channel called Andres the Designer, so you can find me there as well. And hope this chat was helpful.
oh, it
It
definitely
was.
was.
It definitely was. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much,
Appreciate your
man.
time.
Take care. See y'all next
Cheers.
episode, everybody.
Cheers.
Now we gotta. Oh, I was working the wrong. We got